Not all love stories are about being together. Some are about honesty, distance, and the strength it takes to walk away before anyone gets hurt. The knock came just before sunset, quick and unsure, and Emma felt a strange tension as she wiped her hands and walked to the door, not expecting anyone, but sensing that this moment mattered. When she opened it, she saw her nephew Ethan standing there, taller than she remembered, shoulders tight, eyes lowered, his usual calm replaced by clear nerves. He tried to smile but failed, and that alone told her something was wrong. She stepped aside without asking questions, letting him enter the warm, quiet house where memories still lived in the walls. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch instead of relaxing like he used to, his hands moving restlessly, his breath shallow, as if every word he wanted to say was fighting to stay hidden. Emma watched him closely, noticing how adulthood had changed him, but not erased the boy she once helped raise, the boy who trusted her more than most people. She asked gently if he was okay, and he nodded too fast, the kind of answer that meant the opposite. He said he did not plan to come, but did not know where else to go, and the honesty in his voice made Emma's chest tighten. Outside, the sky darkened, and inside, the room felt heavy, as if time itself slowed down to listen. Ethan stared at the floor, then at his hands, then finally met her eyes for a brief second before looking away again. And in that movement, Emma felt the weight of something long hidden. He said he had been carrying something for years, something that never left him, something he thought he could control until tonight. Emma did not interrupt, knowing silence was sometimes the kindest space to offer. Ethan spoke faster now, afraid that if he stopped, he would lose the courage to continue. He talked about growing up, about leaving home, about trying to become his own person, and how some feelings follow you no matter how far you go. Emma listened, her heart beating faster, sensing that this was not a simple confession, but a turning point. She remembered late-night talks from years ago, moments of comfort and support she thought were small, but clearly meant more to him. Ethan admitted he felt confused, not about right and wrong, but about his own heart, which never seemed to listen to logic. He said he respected her deeply and feared hurting her most of all, which was why he kept his distance lately, why he avoided family gatherings, why he seemed like a stranger when he visited. Emma felt a mix of sadness and concern, realizing that whatever he was about to say came from pain, not impulse. The house felt quieter with every word, the ticking clock loud in the background, marking time that could not be undone. Ethan finally said he needed her to know the truth before he left town, and that single sentence made Emma's breath catch because she had not known he was planning to leave. She asked why, but he shook his head, saying he would explain everything, just not all at once, because he needed to say the hardest part first. He took a deep breath, his voice shaking, and said that some connections feel deeper than intended, that admiration can turn into longing without permission, and that pretending otherwise had been tearing him apart. Emma stood frozen, not from fear, but from the sudden understanding that this moment would change how they both saw the past. She did not feel anger or shock, only the quiet ache of realizing how easily care can grow into something more when loneliness and closeness mix. Ethan finished by saying he did not expect anything from her, that he was not asking for acceptance of his feelings, only understanding of why he had been struggling and why leaving felt like the only way forward. The room seemed to hold its breath as his words settled between them, and Emma knew that this was only the beginning of a difficult conversation, one that would test boundaries, love, and the strength to choose what is right over what is easy. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped tightly together, staring at the floor as if it held all the answers, and Emma felt the weight of unspoken words pressing the room into silence, the kind of silence that carries more meaning than any conversation. He finally spoke, his voice low and hesitant, saying it was about her, and Emma froze for a moment, caught off guard, unsure how to respond without interrupting the flow of something so fragile and personal. He rushed to clarify that nothing inappropriate had happened or would happen, that he had never crossed any lines, that his respect for her was absolute, and yet his words trembled with the truth he could no longer hide. Ethan began, explaining how her presence had always been a safe place for him, how after his father's passing, she had been the one to hold the family together and to listen to him when no one else could, how her support had shaped him in ways he could not ignore. Emma felt a pang of nostalgia and warmth, remembering the nights they had spent talking quietly, the afternoons she had stayed home with him, guiding him, comforting him, and how those moments now carried a weight far beyond memory. He confessed that over time, admiration had grown into feelings he had tried to suppress, that no matter how he dated or tried to move on, her kindness and the way she made him feel understood lingered in his heart. Ethan admitted he felt guilty for having these feelings, for the confusion they caused, for the distance he had been keeping between them. and he explained that leaving town was his only way to cope without hurting anyone, without breaking trust, without crossing boundaries that should never be crossed. Emma's chest ached with empathy as she realized the depth of his struggle, the sincerity behind every word, the courage it took for him to reveal emotions that could have easily been misunderstood or condemned. Ethan's voice shook as he described the internal battle he fought every day, the longing he could not control, the moments when he wanted to run to her but knew it would be wrong, and how keeping it inside had been eating him from the inside out. He explained that he had come tonight not for comfort, not for answers, not for permission, but to finally release the truth he had carried alone for so long, to unburden himself and let her understand why he had been distant, why he had avoided eye contact, why he had seemed different. Emma listened intently, absorbing every detail, feeling a mixture of sorrow and admiration, knowing that his honesty was a gift, even if the feelings themselves were complicated, even if the situation was heart-wrenching. Ethan paused, took a deep breath, and said that he needed to tell her everything before he left, that leaving without saying the truth would haunt him forever, that he needed her to know why his behavior had changed, why he had pulled away from family, why he had carried a secret that had shadowed his life for years. Emma remained silent, giving him space, letting the words flow without interruption, because she understood that his courage and vulnerability were rare, that this was a pivotal moment for both of them, that the truth had the power to change the way they connected forever. Ethan admitted he had tried to ignore the feelings, to dismiss them as fleeting, to bury them beneath friendship and family loyalty, but they never faded, and pretending otherwise had been exhausting, painful, and unfair to both of them. He confessed that he feared the consequences of honesty, feared that his love would be rejected or misunderstood, feared that she might see him differently. But staying silent had become unbearable, and leaving without confession was not an option. Emma felt a complex swirl of emotions, compassion, sorrow, pride, and a strange longing she hadn't expected, and realized that love, respect, and family could coexist even in the most complicated of feelings. Ethan explained that his decision to leave was not about escaping her, but about protecting her, himself, and the family from a situation that could never be anything more than unspoken longing, and that he hoped in time she could understand that his love, though real, was not a demand or a burden. His eyes met hers, briefly, full of emotion, pleading for understanding, and she saw the honesty shining there, a young man wrestling with feelings beyond his control, trying to do the right thing. Emma reached out subtly, placing a hand near his, not to encourage or reject, but to offer reassurance that she understood, that she felt the weight of his words, and that she respected his courage. Ethan's shoulders relaxed slightly, a small sign that releasing the truth had lifted some of the burden he had carried alone, though sadness lingered for what could never be, for what might never be possible between them. He explained that confessing was not a request for a relationship, not a step toward romance, but a final act of honesty, a way to close a chapter of longing that had quietly shaped his life since he had grown up under her guidance. Emma absorbed every word, feeling the intensity of a bond that had always been there, transformed now into something bittersweet, something delicate, something that would never be acted upon, but would always remain a part of their shared history. Ethan finished by saying he hoped distance and time would soften his feelings, that he could learn to live without the ache of unspoken love, that he could find peace in the decision to leave, and that he wanted her to know that his affection had never been about selfish desire, but about deep respect and gratitude for her presence in his life. Emma nodded, silently, acknowledging that the honesty, though difficult, was a gift, a brave revelation that allowed them both to face reality with clarity, maturity, and a sense of dignity. In that moment, the room felt heavy but honest, charged with emotions that were real but carefully restrained. And Emma realized that sometimes love is not about closeness, but about knowing when to step back, when to let someone go, and how to honor feelings without crossing lines, keeping hearts safe while still allowing them to feel deeply. Ethan looked relieved and sorrowful at the same time, knowing that the truth had finally been spoken, that the burden was shared, and that leaving was still necessary. Yet both of them understood that their connection, though complicated, was meaningful and would linger in memory, teaching lessons about love, restraint, and the courage it takes to be vulnerable, even when the outcome is painful. The night stretched long and quiet after Ethan's confession, and Emma lay awake, staring at the ceiling as her mind replayed every word, every hesitation, every glance, realizing how much courage it had taken for him to speak, and how their bond had grown into something neither of them had expected. She thought about his youth, about the loss of his father, about the way she had guided him through tough times, and how those moments had quietly shaped both of their lives, leaving feelings unspoken that were now impossible to ignore. Ethan slept in the guest room, but Emma could feel his presence in the house, the energy of unspoken longing lingering in the corners, making her heartache in ways she had not anticipated. Morning came, and with it, the reality of the situation settled in. She found Ethan at the kitchen table, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, eyes distant but alert, as if bracing for a conversation that could not be avoided. He spoke first, apologizing softly for any discomfort he might have caused, and Emma reassured him that he had done nothing wrong, only that the emotions involved were complicated and needed careful handling. They talked gently, carefully about boundaries, respect, and the necessity of distance, understanding that feelings can exist without being acted upon, that love can be real yet restrained, and that caring deeply for someone does not always mean being together in the way the heart longs. Ethan admitted that leaving town was painful but necessary, that staying in the same space would only make the unspoken feelings harder to manage, and that he wanted to do the right thing for both of them, even if it meant sacrificing his own comfort. Emma listened, her own emotions a mix of sadness, empathy, and admiration, recognizing his maturity, his bravery, and the depth of his respect. And she offered support without judgment, letting him know that honesty was a strength, not a weakness. They shared quiet moments of reflection, sipping coffee, speaking in fragments, sometimes pausing to simply be in the same room without words, feeling the tension, the care, and the complexity of human emotions unfold between them. Emma touched his hand briefly, gently, not to encourage romance, but to communicate understanding, compassion, and recognition of his struggle. And Ethan's expression softened, a small relief crossing his face, as if that simple act confirmed he had been heard. They discussed the difficulty of loving someone in ways that cannot be fully expressed, of managing emotions that are honest, yet must be restrained, and the necessity of protecting both hearts while preserving dignity, understanding that sometimes the bravest act of love is letting go. Ethan spoke about hope that distance would allow him to heal, that he could redirect his emotions toward a future that made sense, that he could still carry gratitude and affection for Emma without letting it control his life. Emma shared her perspective, explaining that life often places people in roles where care and love intersect in complicated ways, and that the measure of character is how gracefully one navigates these challenges, balancing honesty, restraint, and compassion. They acknowledged the bittersweet nature of their bond, knowing it had brought joy, growth, and deep emotional connection, yet also understanding that it could never become a conventional love story, that their connection was profound but needed boundaries to remain healthy and honorable. As Ethan prepared to pack his bag for his departure, they moved through the routine with careful attention to tone and gesture, sharing small moments that were full of emotion but free of pressure, moments that reflected mutual respect, understanding, and quiet affection. Emma felt a profound sense of pride in the young man Ethan had become, recognizing his ability to face difficult emotions head-on, to communicate with honesty, and to act with integrity even when his heart longed for more than circumstances allowed. They talked about life, about future possibilities, about the importance of maintaining family bonds even while navigating complex emotions, and about the subtle ways in which love and care can manifest in human relationships without crossing boundaries or causing harm. Ethan expressed gratitude for her guidance, her patience, and her willingness to listen without judgment, and Emma acknowledged his courage, encouraging him to carry forward the lessons learned in their shared experience as he stepped into the next chapter of his life. There was a gentle, unspoken understanding between them that this goodbye was not an eraser of their connection, but a transformation of it, turning longing and affection into respect, memory, and hope for a future where both could live fully without regret. The house felt quiet and reflective as the morning light shifted, signaling change, transition, and the delicate balance of emotions. And both Emma and Ethan felt the weight and relief of truth finally spoken, of emotions honored but carefully managed, and of the deep, lasting impact that honest communication can have on hearts willing to listen. As Ethan left the kitchen that morning, Emma watched him with a mixture of sorrow, admiration, and quiet hope, understanding that their bond, though complicated, had been strengthened by honesty, care, and the recognition that love sometimes means stepping back, giving space, and allowing both people to grow without compromising values or integrity. In that moment, Emma realized that feelings, even those that cannot be acted upon, are never wasted. They shape who we are, teach resilience, and deepen the capacity for empathy. And that true love is sometimes defined not by possession, but by respect, understanding, and the courage to do what is right despite the ache of the heart. The moment came for Ethan to leave, and the air felt heavy with unspoken emotions, the kind that settle quietly between two people who care deeply but know their paths must diverge. And as he stood at the door, his hand hovering over the handle, Emma felt a mix of sadness, pride, and gentle hope swelling inside her chest. He turned to her one last time, his eyes full of gratitude, longing, and relief all at once. And he said softly that he was thankful, not just for her understanding tonight, but for the years she had guided him, comforted him, and shaped his life in ways he could never repay. Emma smiled, a tender, quiet smile, knowing that their connection had changed both of them forever, that the honesty they had shared was a gift, and that their bond, though complicated, was built on trust, respect, and care. Ethan stepped outside, paused, and looked back, admitting that he hoped one day he could let go of the ache in his heart, that time and distance might soften his longing without erasing the gratitude and love that had always been part of him, and that he wished her happiness above all else. Emma nodded, her voice steady but soft, telling him that feelings, no matter how deep, could be honored without being acted upon, that love sometimes means releasing, that life teaches us patience, and that courage is shown not just in pursuit, but in restraint. As he walked down the driveway, bags in hand, the early morning light cast long shadows, reflecting the bittersweet nature of their farewell, the quiet ache of what could not be, and the lessons learned through honesty, integrity, and emotional courage. Emma returned inside and felt the house both emptier and fuller at the same time, carrying the weight of what had passed, and the warmth of knowing that love, even unfulfilled, can exist in forms that are honorable, lasting, and transformative. Days turned into weeks, and she received a message from Ethan telling her that he was finding peace, that he had met someone kind, and that the process of letting go was slowly bringing relief. And Emma felt a calm pride knowing that he had grown through the experience, learning the strength of honesty, the power of respect, and the importance of self-care in the face of emotional challenges. She reflected on the nature of human emotions, how connection can create longing, how boundaries must be respected, and how love does not always require fulfillment to be meaningful. Realizing that their story was a testament to the courage it takes to feel deeply, speak truthfully, and act wisely, Emma thought back on all the moments she had shared with Ethan, childhood laughter, shared grief, quiet conversations, and small acts of care, and recognized that these memories had not been diminished by the complexity of feelings. Instead, they were enriched, showing that emotional bonds can grow stronger even when constrained by circumstance. She understood now that their connection had been a learning experience for both, teaching patience, empathy, and the subtle art of loving someone without possession, of honoring feelings while maintaining integrity, and of balancing the heart's desires with the mind's wisdom. Each day brought small reminders of Ethan, from his favorite mug still in the cupboard to the way sunlight fell on the living room where they had talked. And Emma felt a mixture of melancholy and comfort, knowing that some love remains in memory, shapes character, and guides future choices, even when it cannot manifest in the present. She thought about the lessons Ethan had learned as well, the importance of honesty, the courage to confront emotions, the respect for boundaries, and the realization that sometimes leaving is the act of love that protects everyone involved. Understanding that he had acted with maturity and integrity, and that his departure did not diminish the bond they shared, but transformed it into something peaceful, reflective, and enduring. Weeks later, Emma caught herself smiling at small memories of him, recalling his words, his nervous glances, and his eventual courage, feeling a quiet joy that despite the heartbreak, both of them had chosen honesty, kindness, and respect over easy emotion or impulsive desire. She realized that love is not always about closeness or fulfillment, but about the depth of understanding, the bravery to speak truth, and the grace to step back when circumstances demand it, and that both she and Ethan had exemplified these qualities in their own ways, shaping the foundation for healthier emotional experiences in the future. Emma also understood that closure is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, reflective, and led through everyday acts, and that true emotional maturity comes from honoring feelings without letting them control decisions, from carrying affection in a way that does not harm anyone, and from trusting that time and distance can heal hearts while preserving respect. The message from Ethan confirmed this, showing that he had begun to move forward, finding balance and hope, while still valuing the connection they had shared. And Emma felt a calm satisfaction, knowing that honesty and courage had led to growth rather than regret. She contemplated how human relationships often involve complexity, unspoken longing, and emotional learning, and that navigating these waters with compassion, respect, and clarity can create bonds that, while not romantic, are meaningful, transformative, and deeply human. Emma reflected on her own growth through the experience, acknowledging that listening, supporting, and maintaining boundaries had strengthened her empathy, patience, and emotional wisdom, teaching her that love exists in many forms, that restraint can be a gift, and that caring deeply sometimes means letting go for the greater good. Days and weeks passed, and the house slowly returned to its usual rhythm. Yet the echoes of their conversations, the weight of truth shared, and the lessons of love, honesty, and courage remained, leaving Emma with a sense of peace, a quiet pride, and an understanding that life's most profound connections often teach us not through fulfillment, but through integrity, growth, and the honor of feelings fully acknowledged. In the end, Emma understood that this story of honesty, restraint, and emotional bravery was not a tale of loss, but of wisdom, not of failure, but of love preserved in dignity, and that both she and Ethan had emerged stronger, wiser, and more capable of embracing life with open hearts, guided by the lessons of compassion, courage, and the quiet power of choosing what is right over what is easy.